24 years. That's how long Maya had been living inside a life that wasn't entirely hers. She didn't know that yet, but she was about to find out. When we first meet Maya, she's 24 years old, sitting at a kitchen table at 2 in the morning, laptop open, hands trembling. Not from cold, not from caffeine, from the kind of fear that sets in when you realize the ground beneath your entire life might not be as solid as you thought. She stares at the screen. Her breathing is shallow. And then, barely above a whisper, she says to no one in particular, 24 years. And it took one website to unravel every single thing they told me. Before we continue with this video, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But let's back up, because this moment didn't come out of nowhere. Maya had always been the different one. Not in a way anyone talked about openly, but in a way everyone quietly noticed. In a house full of straight blonde hair and fair skin, Maya had dark, wild curls and an olive complexion that no one could quite explain. Her mother Linda, 52, warm but occasionally evasive, always brushed it off. "You take after your grandmother," she'd say, whenever Maya asked. Her father Robert, 55, quiet and conflict avoidant, would just smile and change the subject. And Maya, who loved her family, who had no reason not to trust them, let it go. Every single time. Then there was Derek, her younger brother, 21, golden-haired, athletic, the kind of son who gets framed photos on the mantle. Maya didn't resent him. Not exactly. But she noticed. The way a room lit up differently when Derek walked in. The way certain compliments were paid to him that never quite made their way to her. She noticed. She just never said anything. Then came the dinner that changed everything. A family gathering to celebrate Maya's new job, a genuine milestone, a moment she'd worked hard for. The food was good. The mood was light. And then her Uncle Ray, 58, Linda's older brother, had one too many glasses of wine and started a sentence he never finished. Well, I mean, considering everything that happened when she was. Linda cut him off so fast the table went silent. A sharp look. A redirected conversation. And Uncle Ray, suddenly sober-seeming, stared down at his plate and didn't speak again for the rest of the night. Maya caught the look that passed between Linda and her Aunt Carol, 55. Quick. Loaded. The kind of look that isn't about nothing. She had seen that look before. She just never knew what it was for. That night, back in her childhood bedroom, Maya found something she hadn't thought about in years, an old shoebox of family photos tucked in the back of her closet. She flipped through them slowly. Baby photos, hospital pictures, and then one that made her stop completely. Her parents, a newborn in Linda's arms, both of them smiling at the camera. She flipped it over. The date on the back was wrong. Not by a year, not by a month, by 11 days. 11 days after her birthday. Small detail. Enormous crack. Maya sat on the edge of her bed for a long time. Then she opened her laptop, went to a DNA ancestry website she'd heard about a dozen times but never bothered with, and placed an order for a testing kit. She told herself it was just curiosity. But as she clicked confirm and took a screenshot of that photo, she knew, deep in the part of herself that had always felt slightly out of place, that she wasn't doing this out of curiosity. She was doing this because some part of her had always known. She just needed the proof. The kit would arrive in 3 weeks. And when those results came back, nothing would ever be the same. 3 weeks is a long time when you're waiting for answers you're not sure you want. Maya told herself to forget about the kit. To go to work, eat her meals, call her mom on Sundays like she always did, and just live normally until the results came in. Simple enough plan. It lasted about 4 days. Because once you start looking, really looking, you cannot unsee what was always there. It started small. Maya began paying attention to things she'd spent a lifetime glossing over. The way Linda's posture changed whenever the topic of genetics came up, a subtle stiffening, a quick subject change, smooth as silk and twice as practiced. The way Robert always had somewhere else to be when conversations got even remotely personal. She used to call him the world's most lovable deflector. It was a family joke. Now it felt less funny. She went back through old photos, Not just the shoebox, but albums, Facebook archives, the dusty frames in the hallway. What she found wasn't one smoking gun. It was a pattern. Derek had baby photos going back to the hospital room, the ride home, the first bath, the first Christmas. Maya's earliest photos were from what looked like her second birthday. Not a single image of her as a newborn. Not one. She asked Linda about it casually. Mentioned she was looking for baby photos for a work project, a little display thing, nothing serious. Linda smiled and said, "Oh, I think most of those got lost in the move, sweetheart." They hadn't moved since Maya was 3. Maya called Priya the same night. Priya, 24, her best friend since the 7th grade, the person who had sat with her through every hard thing, failed exams, bad breakups. The year Maya's anxiety got so bad, she barely left her apartment. Priya listened the way she always did, quietly, without interrupting, letting Maya lay out every piece before she said a word. When Maya finished, Priya was silent for a moment. Then, "Maya, have you ever actually seen your birth certificate?" "Not a copy. The original." Maya opened her mouth, closed it. She hadn't. Not once in her adult life had she held the original document. She'd used a copy for her passport application years ago, a copy her mother had handed her in a sealed envelope, already ready to go, no searching required. At the time, that had seemed helpful. Now it seemed deliberate. She asked Linda the next day. Kept her voice light, her expression neutral. Said she needed it for something administrative. Linda said it was in storage somewhere, said it with that same seamless pivot Maya was only now learning to recognize, and then immediately launched into a detailed story about Derek's upcoming birthday party, the cake she was planning, whether Maya thought a bonfire in the backyard was a good idea, given the weather forecast. By the time the call ended, 12 minutes had passed, and the birth certificate had not been mentioned again. Maya sat with her phone in her lap after she hung up. She thought about what Linda had said to her when she was 9 years old, crying after kids at school had called her the different one. Linda had wrapped both arms around her and said, firm and warm, "You are ours. Don't you ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Maya had held onto those words for 15 years like a life raft. But sitting there now, replaying them as an adult, she heard something she hadn't caught as a child. Linda didn't say, "You belong here." She said, "You are ours." Possession, not belonging. The difference, once noticed, was impossible to unfeel. And then the email arrived. Maya was in a parking lot outside a grocery store when her phone buzzed. "Your DNA results are ready." She sat in the driver's seat, engine off, and opened the app with fingers that weren't entirely steady. The ethnicity breakdown loaded first. The results were completely inconsistent with both sides of her family, not a minor variation, not a quirky outlier percentage. Fundamentally, categorically different. Her heart was already hammering when she scrolled down to the next section. DNA matches. And there, listed under close family member, likely parent or sibling, was a name. Sandra Kowalski. Maya stared at it. She had never heard that name in her life. She sat in that parking lot for 10 full minutes without moving. And then she did the only thing she could think of. She Googled her. Sandra Kowalski. 47 years old. 2 states away. Maya typed the name into Google with one hand, the other pressed flat against her knee to stop it from shaking. The search loaded in seconds. A Facebook profile. Public. Maya clicked it before she'd fully decided to. And then she stopped breathing. Sandra's profile photo was taken outdoors. A backyard somewhere, summer light, casual smile. She was standing next to a teenage girl, maybe 16 or 17. Dark curly hair. Olive skin. Same jaw structure. Same eyes. Same way of standing with her weight slightly to one side, like she was always half ready to move. Maya had spent 24 years thinking she was simply the odd one out. A genetic anomaly. A throwback. The family member who just happened to look different from everyone else. She was looking at a woman who could be her in 20 years. She scrolled. Slowly. Methodically. Photo after photo. Sandra at a birthday dinner. Sandra at a beach. Sandra laughing at something off camera. And in every image, the jawline, the complexion, the curl pattern, the bone structure. Maya saw herself reflected back in a stranger's face. Not approximately. Not vaguely. Exactly. Her throat tightened. Her eyes burned. She kept scrolling anyway. Here is what Maya knew at this point. She had a DNA match classified as a likely parent or sibling. She had a woman 2 states away who looked unmistakably like her. She had a family that couldn't produce her birth certificate, had almost no photos of her as a newborn, and had spent her entire life deflecting every question about why she looked the way she did. Here is what she didn't know yet. Why? And the why, as she was about to discover, was so much worse than anything she had imagined. Maya didn't call Linda. She didn't call Robert. She sat in that parking lot until the sky started going pink at the edges, turning everything over in her mind, and then she made a decision that would set the next chapter of her life in motion. She opened the Ancestry platform, found Sandra's profile, and typed a message. She kept it short, careful, neutral enough to leave room for any explanation, because some part of her, even now, was still hoping for an explanation that made sense. A mix-up, a clerical error, a distant relative she'd simply never been told about.
Hi.
The DNA results connected us. I think we might know each other, or should. I'd love to talk when you're ready. She read it 3 times, then hit send before she could take it back. She expected to wait days, maybe longer. She expected uncertainty, confusion, maybe even silence. Sandra responded in 40 minutes. 2 words. I know. Those 2 words dismantled every remaining hope Maya had for a simple explanation. I know. Not, what do you mean? Not, I think there's been a mistake. Not confusion or surprise or the careful politeness of a stranger navigating an unexpected message. Just, I know. Present tense. Immediate. Like she had been waiting for exactly this message from exactly this person for a very long time. The messages that followed came slowly. Sandra was clearly choosing every word with the same care Maya had, but what emerged, piece by piece, over the next hour, was devastating in its clarity. Sandra had a daughter in 1999.
She had been young, broke,
fleeing a dangerous relationship. She had gone through the pregnancy largely alone, had given birth after a long and difficult labor, and had been heavily sedated during the final stage of delivery and the hours that followed. When she came around, she was told her baby had not survived. She never believed it. She said she had held her daughter, briefly, barely, in the haze right before the sedation took full hold, and she knew. The way she put it in her message was simple, and it wrecked Maya completely. A mother doesn't forget. Not even for a second. I knew she was alive. I never stopped knowing. Sandra had spent 24 years searching, filing requests, hitting walls, never giving up entirely, even when every door closed in her face. And now here was Maya, on the other side of a screen, 24 years old. The math was not subtle. Maya read the messages 3 times. Then she closed the app, put her phone face down on the passenger seat, and stared through the windshield at the darkening parking lot. She thought about Linda's voice on the phone that morning. Cheerful, easy, talking about birthday cake and weather forecasts and bonfire logistics. She thought about Robert's smile, that deflecting, nowhere-to-land smile he deployed whenever things got uncomfortable. She thought about Uncle Ray at the dinner table, starting a sentence he never finished. Well, I mean, considering everything that happened when she was... She picked her phone back up. She did not call Linda. She did not call Robert. She started the car, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove directly to her parents' house. 40 minutes. She did not turn on music. She did not call anyone. She drove in complete silence, and by the time she pulled into the driveway, she had made up her mind. She was going to walk in there, and she was going to put the phone on the counter. And she was going to watch Linda's face. She didn't knock. She never used to knock. It was still her childhood home, still the place she'd grown up, still the kitchen she'd eaten 1,000 breakfasts in. She walked in like she always had. Linda was at the counter, sleeves rolled up, halfway through making dinner. Maya set her phone down. Sandra's messages, visible on the screen, said nothing, just watched. Linda looked at the phone. The color left her face so completely and so quickly that Maya felt her stomach drop, not because she was surprised, but because she had been holding on to one last thread of hope that there was still an innocent explanation. That thread snapped in real time. No confusion crossed Linda's face. No question. No, what is this? Just silence. Long and heavy and terrible. And then Linda pulled out a chair, sat down slowly, like her legs had stopped working properly, put her face in both hands, and said, in a voice so quiet Maya almost didn't catch it, "I was wondering when this day would come." She had been waiting. All this time, she had been waiting. And now Maya needed to know everything. Every single word of it. 7 words. That's all it took to confirm everything. Not, "I don't know what you're talking about." Not, "Maya, let me explain. This isn't what it looks like." Just 7 words, delivered into both hands, in a voice that carried 24 years of waiting inside it. Linda had known this moment was coming. She had been living with the countdown her entire life. And now the clock had run out. Maya pulled out the chair across from Linda and sat down. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry, not yet. She just looked at the woman who had raised her, packed her lunches, held her when she was 9 years old, and told her, "You are ours." And she said, quietly and clearly, "Tell me everything. And don't leave anything out." Linda looked up. Her eyes were red. Her hands were shaking in her lap. And for a long moment, Maya thought she might deflect, might pivot, might reach for the same smooth subject change she had deployed 1,000 times over 24 years. But she didn't. She started talking. The story came out in pieces, and each piece was worse than the last. Linda and Robert had tried to have children for years. Multiple rounds of treatment, multiple losses, the kind of prolonged grief that quietly hollows a marriage from the inside. By their mid-30s, they had been told biological children were unlikely. They were on a waiting list for adoption, a long list with no guarantees, no timeline. Then Linda met Sandra. They worked at the same company briefly. Sandra was a temp, young, early 20s, visibly pregnant, and visibly struggling, fleeing a relationship that had turned dangerous. No family support. No financial safety net. She was, by any measure, alone in a way that most people never experience. Linda had reached out, offered help. It started as groceries and a spare room for a few weeks, genuine kindness or what felt like it. Sandra was grateful. They developed something that resembled friendship. And somewhere in those months, the idea was planted, never stated outright, but present, growing, that Sandra's baby might have a better life with a stable couple who desperately wanted a child. Sandra never agreed to that. That part is critical. Sandra never agreed. What happened next, Linda explained with her eyes fixed on the table, was Robert. Not her. Robert. Sandra had gone into labor early. The delivery was long and complicated. She had held her daughter, briefly, barely, in the window before the medical team sedated her for the final stage. And while Sandra was unconscious, Robert, who had been present at the hospital under the guise of being supportive, moved. Fast and deliberately. He had a cousin who worked in hospital administration. The paperwork was forged. Consent documents that Sandra never signed, never saw, never knew existed. The story given to Sandra when she woke up was that her baby had not survived. A tragedy, a devastating loss. The kind of thing people don't question when they're already in shock and grief. Robert brought the baby home 2 days later. Linda found out 2 months in. Maya went very still. 2 months, she repeated. Linda nodded. She couldn't look up. You found out when I was 2 months old. And you said nothing. Another nod. Smaller this time. For 24 years. The kitchen was so quiet Maya could hear the refrigerator humming. She thought about Sandra's message. A mother doesn't forget. Not even for a second. And she thought about Sandra spending 2 decades filing requests, hitting walls, never fully believing what she had been told. Grieving a daughter who was alive, who was 2 states away, who was eating family dinners and taking Sunday phone calls, and being told she was theirs. Maya stood up. She needed to stand up. She needed to not be sitting down for the next part. Where is Dad? At work. He doesn't know you know. He's about to. That was when the front door opened. Derek walked in with car keys in hand and the easy expression of someone who had no idea they were about to step into the wreckage of everything they thought was true. He took one look at Linda's face and one look at Maya's and stopped completely in the doorway. What happened? Neither of them answered immediately. Maya looked at her brother who looked exactly like both their parents, who had never had any reason to question where he came from, who had grown up in the same house with the same family and had no idea that the foundation under all of it was cracked, and she felt something unexpected move through her. Not anger at him, not distance. She felt protective of him, because this was going to break something in Derek too. And he had done nothing wrong. She crossed the kitchen, turned her phone screen toward him, and said simply, "Read this. I'll explain everything." She watched his face as he read, watched the color drain out of it, watched his jaw set, watched his eyes go from confused to stunned to something that looked a lot like grief. He looked up at Linda. Linda looked away. "Mom." His voice cracked on the single syllable. "Is this real?" Linda didn't answer. That was its own answer. Maya picked up her phone. She had one call to make before Robert got home. One call that mattered more than any conversation she was about to have in that house. She stepped outside, closed the back door behind her, stood on the same porch where she'd learned to ride a bike, where she'd cried after prom, where she'd hugged Linda goodbye the day she left for college. She opened the Ancestry app, found Sandra's number. They had exchanged it in the last round of messages. Her thumb hovered over it. She pressed call. Sandra picked up on the first ring. And Sandra was already crying. Before Maya said a single word, before she'd even opened her mouth, Sandra was already crying. Like she knew. Like she had been waiting by the phone since the moment she sent that first message, hoping and terrified in equal measure. Maya opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "It's me." 2 words. 24 years of distance collapsed into a phone call on a back porch at dusk. The call lasted 3 hours. By the end of it, the sun was long gone. The house behind Maya had gone quiet, and she had made 2 decisions that would reshape everything that came next. One would change her family forever. The other would change her life. And neither of them could wait until morning. Some stories end with a revelation. This one was just getting started. Because finding out the truth is one thing. Deciding what to do with it, who you become on the other side of it, that is something else entirely. And Maya had spent 3 hours on that back porch with Sandra's voice in her ear, and by the time she walked back inside, she was not the same person who had walked out. She was someone who finally knew exactly where she came from, and someone who had to decide exactly what happened next. The full picture. What actually happened. Over the days that followed, everything came into focus with a clarity that was almost unbearable. Robert had orchestrated all of it. That was the truth at the center of everything. Linda had been complicit through silence, a silence she had maintained for 24 years out of fear, out of love for Maya, out of the devastating human capacity to justify what we cannot bring ourselves to undo. But the original act, the decision, the forged documents, the lie told to a sedated woman that her daughter had not survived, that was Robert. He had used his hospital administrator cousin to falsify consent paperwork. He had moved quickly during the window when Sandra was unconscious and vulnerable, and he had done it with enough precision that the official record told a clean, unopened story. The cousin had died years earlier. The paper trail was thin, but it was not gone. Maya met with a family law attorney within the week. Not in anger, or not only in anger, but because she understood instinctively that documentation was time-sensitive. Memories fade. People make decisions that close doors. She wanted every door left open. The attorney was direct with her. What Robert had done constituted fraud, falsification of legal documents, and the unlawful removal of a child. The civil and potentially criminal implications were real. The path forward would not be simple, but it existed. The confrontation and the collapse. Robert came home the night of Linda's confession to a house that had already changed shape around him. Maya was still there. Derek was still there. Linda was still at the kitchen table. And when Robert walked through the door and read the room, his face did the thing Maya had been watching it do her entire life. It reached for deflection, for the easy pivot, for the smile that meant let's not do this right now. There was nowhere to pivot to. Linda had agreed, in the hours while Maya was on the porch, to make a recorded call, not for legal purposes, but for Maya's own clarity, her own record of the truth, spoken by the people who had kept it from her. Robert, faced with Linda's account and Maya's silence, and Derek sitting at the table unable to look at him, did not deny it. He offered justifications instead. They had been desperate. Sandra had been in danger. From her ex, from her circumstances, from a life that seemed to have no floor. He had told himself the baby would be safer.
Loved.
He had told himself it was the right thing. He had been telling himself that for 24 years, and somewhere along the way, he had almost made himself believe it. Maya let him finish. Then she said, quietly, and without raising her voice, "You didn't save me.
You stole me.
And you let another mother grieve her child for 24 years. Robert had no answer. There isn't one. The aftermath. What happened to everyone? Sandra filed a civil report with the support of her own attorney. The case moved slowly. These things always do, but it moved. Robert and the estate of his deceased cousin were named in a formal legal review. The investigation was ongoing. Linda cooperated fully. She provided documentation, written testimony, and a formal recorded account of everything she knew and everything she had stayed silent about. It was the only thing she had left to give Sandra, the truth, finally and completely, and she gave it without being asked twice. It did not undo 24 years. Nothing could. But Sandra's attorney confirmed it was significant. The marriage did not survive it. Robert moved out within the month. Not dramatically, no screaming, no thrown objects. Just a quiet, terrible dismantling of a household. Two people who had built a life on top of a life finally running out of foundation. Linda did not fight it. She told Maya, in one of their careful, rebuilding conversations, that she thought some part of her had always been waiting for this too. That living with a secret had cost her more than she had ever admitted to herself. Derek went into therapy. He called Maya every few days, sometimes just to talk, sometimes just to sit on the phone in silence for a few minutes, both of them processing the same earthquake from different angles. Their relationship, far from fracturing, became something neither of them had expected. Closer. More honest. Two people who had lost the version of their family they thought they had, and were quietly, steadily choosing each other anyway. Sandra and the beginning. Maya and Sandra began meeting in person 6 weeks after the first phone call. It was not a movie reunion. Maya had braced herself for overwhelming emotion, for the kind of moment that plays in slow motion, with swelling music and tearful embraces and instant, seamless connection. The reality was quieter than that. More tentative, more human. They met at a coffee shop halfway between their two cities. Sandra arrived first. Maya spotted her through the window before she went in, and for a moment, she just stood on the sidewalk and looked at her. A woman in her late 40s with dark curly hair and olive skin, and the same way of holding a coffee cup with both hands. Maya had her mother's hands. She had never known that before. They talked for 4 hours. There were long pauses and careful questions, and moments where one of them said something that made the other go still with recognition. Sandra had 2 other children, a son, Marcus, 20, and the teenage daughter from the profile photo, Leah, 17, who were cautiously, nervously, warmly curious about Maya. Not instant family, a beginning. The kind that takes time and intention and a willingness to sit inside the awkward, tender uncertainty of people who share blood but not history. Maya was willing. More than willing. The closing moment. 6 months after that parking lot. 6 months after a DNA kit and a name she'd never heard, and 2 words that cracked her world open. Maya was back at the kitchen table. Same table. Different everything. The laptop was open in front of her, but she wasn't looking at it. She was looking at her phone. Sandra had sent her something that morning, a photo, taken by a nurse in the first hour after Maya was born, before everything was taken from them. Sandra, exhausted and young and barely conscious, holding a newborn against her chest. The baby's dark hair visible against the hospital blanket. Maya had never seen a photo of herself that small. She hadn't known one existed. She saved it to her camera roll. set it as her lock screen. Then she closed the laptop, pushed back from the table, and sat for a moment in the particular quiet of a life that had finally told her the truth. She thought about the 9-year-old who cried because she didn't look like anyone. She thought about every deflected question, every smooth pivot, every time she had let it go because she loved her family and didn't want to pull at the thread. She thought about Sandra, waiting by a phone for 24 years, never fully believing the lie. She thought about what it means to belong somewhere, and how it turns out belonging isn't about matching. It isn't about hair color or bone structure, or looking like the person next to you in the family photo. It's about truth. It's about being known completely, without the parts of you filed down to fit a story someone else needed to tell. Maya had spent 24 years being loved inside a lie. She was just getting started being known inside the truth. She picked up her phone, opened her messages, and typed to Sandra. Got the photo. Thank you. Same time Saturday. Sandra's response came in under a minute. I'll be there. Maya smiled, set the phone face up on the table, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, the quiet didn't feel like something was missing. It just felt like peace.